Have you ever looked up at a full moon and felt an uncanny presence, as if something ancient and watchful were staring back? In the twisted world of fear and hunger, that unsettling feeling isn't just your imagination. It's RHER, the trickster moon god, silently observing humanity from the night sky. RHER is one of the most enigmatic figures in the game's lore, a god who embodies madness and deceit, yet also reveals hidden truths under his eerie moonlight. His influence spans both fear and hunger and its sequel TERMINA, weaving through item descriptions, character dialogues, and horrific events that have baffled players and lore enthusiasts alike. What is RHER, really? A jealous old god clinging to power, a cosmic force of lunacy, or perhaps something even more mysterious? Why does he steal children and orchestrate cruel festivals of death? And how does this moon deity tie into real-world myth, religion, alchemy, and psychology? These are the chilling questions we'll explore in this deep dive. We'll peel back the layers of mystery around RHER, from the in-game lore hidden in ancient books and eerie encounters, to fan theories and inspirations behind his design. By the end, you might just see the moon in fear and hunger, and perhaps our own world, under a very different light. So, sit down, but not too comfortable, because this journey is not for the faint of heart. We're about to venture into the shadow of the trickster moon god. Let's begin where all good stories do, in the darkness, with only a glimmer of moonlight to guide us. RHER, also known by ominous titles like Trickster God, Moon God, the Delinquent One, and the Ever-Watching God. He is one of the old gods in the fear and hunger universe. The old gods are primordial beings, ancient and powerful entities that predate human civilization. Among these cosmic beings, RHER stands out as particularly mysterious and elusive. While many old gods receded from the world or lost interest in mankind's affairs, RHER is one of the last older gods to still observe mankind. In other words, he never truly looked away from us, watching, judging, and scheming from his lofty perch in the sky. From the moment players hear of RHER, it's clear he isn't a benevolent moon deity offering gentle guidance. Quite the opposite. Jealousy and disdain define RHER's attitude toward humanity. The new gods of the fear and hunger world, who are human beings that somehow ascended to godhood, are seen by RHER as mockeries or upstarts. The moon god deeply resents the idea of mere humans attaining divinity. In fact, an old text recounts the new god's words about RHER. He is a jealous kind. He would not share the godhood and the world order with humans and the new gods. He has many ploys to diminish our influence. This paints RHER as a bitter entity clinging to the old cosmic order, essentially an immortal who refuses to let humanity play God. What makes RHER especially intriguing is how he embodies seemingly contradictory concepts. On one hand, he's a deceiver and trickster associated with lies, nightmares, and insanity. On the other hand, RHER is oddly linked to revelation and truth, specifically, ugly truths that can shatter a person's sanity. The moonlight of RHER is said to uncover the truth under the human filth, exposing reality as it really is. But here's the catch. That truth is often too much for a human mind to handle. The implication is chilling. If you bask in RHER's moonlight, you might glimpse some cosmic, horrific truth about existence, and it could drive you mad. In essence, RHER uses truth itself as a weapon, a cruel trick. As the lore book Skin Bible, RHER notes, his blessing to men is his moonlight, which reveals reality beyond our comforting illusions. It's an open question whether this so-called truth is more valid than the filth of human perception. But one thing's for sure, RHER's enlightenment never leads to happiness. Indeed, RHER is often called the god of the insane. In the oldest stories, he's depicted as the patron of those who have succumbed to madness. If you think about it, there's a poetic connection between the moon and madness. Even in our real world, the term lunatic comes from luna, Latin for moon, reflecting an old belief that the full moon can drive people crazy. Fear and hunger takes that notion literally. Under RHER's influence, people lose their minds, experiencing hallucinations, transformations, and a break from reality. In the town of Preheville during Fear and Hunger Termina, nearly everyone exposed to the unearthly moon ends up mentally broken or moon-scorched, mutated into horrific creatures by the moon's curse. Only a rare few, like the woodsman and the mayor, manage to resist complete insanity despite the moon's presence. This widespread lunacy in RHER's wake cements his role as a trickster of madness. He promises knowledge, but delivers horror and confusion. Fittingly, RHER's symbol in the game is as cryptic as the god himself. His sigil consists of 3 interlocking circles, 2 above, 1 below, with strange markings like an omega symbol with a dot. It's an insignia often found in occult books and ritual circles tied to RHER's power. In gameplay, learning RHER's sigil, for example by reading the Skin Bible on RHER, allows one to draw his mark in certain ritual circles and even carve it onto one's flesh for a boon. What boon? Appropriately, it raises the maximum capacity of the mind. Engraving RHER's mark essentially expands a person's mind, giving them a larger mental limit. In game terms, more mind points, which represent sanity or mental energy. It's as if RHER offers to unlock deeper understanding or psychic power, but at a steep risk of courting insanity. This mechanic reflects RHER's dual nature perfectly: knowledge and madness, 2 sides of the same moonlit coin. And speaking of the moon, here lies perhaps the biggest secret to RHER's identity. Remember how we said RHER watches humanity from the sky? The game lore very strongly hints, and fans widely believe, that RHER literally is the moon in the Fear and Hunger universe. One medieval text outright states, "Just looking at the night sky, you can see his presence in an eternal slumber." RHER is literally hiding in plain sight. In other words, that glowing orb above is no lifeless rock. It's the sleeping body, or traces, of the moon god himself. The idea of a deity who became the moon, or dwells within it, has an almost mythological resonance. It calls to mind legends where celestial bodies are actually gods, for example, how some cultures personify the sun or moon as deities. Here, RHER's physical form appears to be the moon hanging over the world, ever watchful even while in eternal slumber. You can't get more hiding in plain sight than that. An ancient trickster god who turned the night sky into his camouflage. This revelation recontextualizes every night scene in the game. When the characters look up at the pale moon, RHER is staring right back, as the mysterious Lady of Moon whispers via telepathy. Just one glance at the night sky, he is ever looking at you. He is very suspicious of you, of men. That line sends shivers down my spine. It's like being told that Big Brother is always watching, except it's the big bad moon, RHER's epithet, the ever-watching God, suddenly makes perfect sense. He's the silent observer above, keeping tabs on the upstart human race with clear distrust. After all, from RHER's perspective, mankind is a species that not only strayed from the old gods, but even dared to become gods themselves. Little wonder he's suspicious and resentful. To sum up, RHER is a complex embodiment of fear and hunger's dark themes. Power versus truth, knowledge versus sanity, gods versus mortals. He's an immortal trickster who reveals horrific truths and drives people insane, all while harboring a cosmic grudge against humanity's ambitions. Now that we've outlined who RHER is and what he represents, it's time to follow his footsteps, or moonbeams, through the timeline of the games. RHER's influence is felt in both installments of the series, sometimes subtly, and sometimes as bold as a blood-red moon in the sky. Let's explore how this sly deity meddles in events, starting with the first game's shadowy lore. In the original Fear and Hunger, set roughly in the late 1500s, RHER never reveals his face outright, but his claws are certainly in the pie. The game's story unfolds within a grim dungeon, a place of unspeakable rituals where various factions vie over a man named Lagarde. Amidst this chaos, if you pay close attention, you'll catch glimpses of RHER's grand scheme quietly taking shape behind the scenes. RHER's ultimate goal at this point in history: to prevent humanity from creating any new gods who could rival the old ones. And his method is every bit as cruel as you'd expect, targeting innocent children destined to become vessels or offspring of the new gods. In essence, RHER seeks to nip godhood in the bud by eliminating the next generation before they can ascend. It's a ruthless plan that echoes ancient myth, most notably the Titan Cronus, who devoured his own children to avoid a prophecy of being overthrown. In Fear and Hunger, RHER fulfills a similar role on a cosmic scale, striving to snuff out the spark of nascent divinity before it can ignite. To carry out this dark agenda, RHER does not act directly. After all, he is a colossal moon locked in eternal slumber above the earth. Instead, he works through loyal servants on the ground. Two of the most notable are figures players may already recognize: Pocket Cat and the Lady of Moon. Pocket Cat, at first glance, appears to be nothing more than a bizarre peddler, a dapper, long-limbed figure with a feline face who trades in children's souls and other unsettling commodities. Many players remember him simply as a creepy merchant, but lore-wise, he is far more sinister. RHER's agent, a sort of bogeyman in children's stories, as one text describes. The Lady of Moon, meanwhile, manifests as a strange spectral woman found deep within the dungeon. She offers miraculous healing, but only in exchange for a living gift, specifically a young girl. Both of these eerie figures are direct extensions of RHER's will. To encounter them in-game is, in truth, to brush against the influence of the moon god himself, though most players will not realize it at first. So, what's the deal with that little girl? Here's the context. Major spoilers for one of the game's endings. She is the daughter of Nilvan, a new god, and Lagarde, a mortal human, essentially a child of great destiny. Nilvan's plan was to elevate her daughter into godhood, potentially creating a powerful new deity, often referred to as the god of fear and hunger. If successful, this would mean humanity, through a new god, had given birth to an entirely new old god. Such a being would be both a terrifying prospect for the ancient pantheon and a potent symbol of human potential. Naturally, RHER was not on board with this idea. The moon god perceived Nilvin's daughter as an enormous threat, a half-god who might one day rise to challenge the existing cosmic order. Thus, RHER set his pawns on a mission: locate the child and remove her from play. During the events of Fear and Hunger 1, both Pocket Cat and the Lady of Moon infiltrate the infamous dungeons of Fear and Hunger in pursuit of Nilvin's daughter. Through subtle storytelling clues, it becomes clear that the Lady of Moon's purpose is explicit. She is there to secure the girl for RHER's designs. Pocket Cat, meanwhile, is heavily implied to share the same objective. After all, he is notorious for luring children away, a bogeyman-like kidnapper cloaked in the guise of a merchant. For the player, this plot thread can be experienced directly, deep within the dungeon. If you manage to rescue the little girl, the Lady of Moon will appear and demand that you hand the child over, insisting that she is to be offered as a gift to the moon god. That encounter stands out as one of the most haunting moral dilemmas in Fear and Hunger. The Lady of Moon presents herself as a gentle, otherworldly figure bathed in an eerie green glow. She even offers to heal all wounds and restore lost limbs, a tremendous boon in a game as merciless as Fear and Hunger. But her price is chilling. She asks for the smallest among you, the innocent girl who has been following at your side. The moon god wants the girl, she states flatly. If you hand the child over, the lady thanks you before vanishing into the uncanny realm she calls the Green Hue, a place she describes as where the older beings originate, likely a cosmic plane of the old gods. The girl is never seen again, presumably delivered into RHER's clutches, or simply extinguished. In return, true to her promise, your party is fully healed, as though by divine grace. It is a mechanically advantageous choice, yet morally horrifying, a quintessential Fear and Hunger moment. Should you refuse, the lady merely departs empty-handed, disappointed but undeterred. Either outcome underscores RHER's ruthless resolve. Through his emissary, the moon god's decree resounds: there will be no future gods. Pocket Cat, for his part, shows an unsettling fixation on children. If you approach him while carrying the little girl, he immediately attempts to barter for her, offering valuable items in exchange, while referring to the child in disturbingly objectifying terms. His dialogue, combined with the strange trinkets in his possession, paints a chilling picture. Pocket Cat has a long history of abducting children. He hums lullabies, reminisces about children's dreams, and speaks with the tone of someone who has stolen innocence countless times before. In essence, Pocket Cat embodies a dark fairy tale monster in RHER's service, ensuring that promising young ones never live long enough to fulfill their destinies. Lore notes confirm that RHER's followers have, across history, been systematically hunting for children to prevent them from becoming vessels for new gods. This campaign of quiet eradication explains the origin of many tragedies scattered throughout the game's backstory. All of them threads leading back to RHER's hidden crusade against human ascension. Despite all his efforts, RHER ultimately fails in the first game's storyline, at least in the canonical ending. Thanks to the player's intervention, depending on choices, and Nilvin's foresight, the child is safely brought to the altar of darkness as intended. In one ending, the little girl is fused with a fragment of an older deity and ascends as the god of fear and hunger, a newly born old god embodying both humanity's suffering and its perseverance. This moment marks a profound turning point in the lore. Humanity has, for the first time, succeeded in birthing an old god of its own, one capable of standing alongside the likes of RHER. RHER's plan was foiled, and the god of fear and hunger would end up being born, leading mankind to a new age of cultural and technological development. Indeed, following this ascension, the world moves forward out of medieval stagnation into the industrial era, a period known as the Cruel Age, where fear and hunger themselves became the harsh crucibles of human progress. In the end, RHER's worst nightmare comes to pass. Mankind unlocked a new level of power and knowledge, heralding an age of rapid advancement that forever shifted the cosmic balance. We can imagine RHER seething in his sleep up there in the moon, silently fuming at being outmaneuvered by human audacity. It echoes a classic mythological theme, the old guard of gods displaced or challenged by younger upstarts. But in this case, the young gods were once mere mortals, which makes the insult all the greater. This defeat might explain why, for a time, RHER goes relatively quiet. Perhaps he retreats to brood and weave new schemes. Or perhaps he truly sinks deeper into that so-called eternal slumber, biding his strength until the right moment. As we will soon see, that moment arrives many years later in the events of Fear and Hunger 2, TERMINA. And this time, RHER's design is far grander and far more brutal. Before moving on, it's worth highlighting a few eerie details in the first Fear and Hunger that tie directly into RHER's unseen presence. Throughout the dungeon, players occasionally encounter bizarre slime-like creatures known as Maniba, amorphous, jellyfish-like beings marked by a single staring eye. In fact, they are the very first enemies the player confronts, lurking in the darkness of the opening areas. The game never explicitly states their origin, but both the community and the official wiki speculate that the Maniba appear to function as pawns in the designs of the moon god RHER. This theory is supported by subtle clues. RHER's sigil can often be found drawn near their spawning grounds, and their existence is linked to the green hue, the same otherworldly plane tied to the Lady of Moon, RHER's servant. In other words, the very first abominations encountered in Fear and Hunger are almost certainly RHER's minions, seeping into the mortal world through cracks in reality. It's as though the moon god's madness itself is leaking into existence, one slime creature at a time. Even if players don't notice on a first playthrough, RHER's shadow looms from the very beginning, quietly setting the game's horrific tone. So, to recap RHER's impact in the first Fear and Hunger, he is the unseen puppeteer, pulling strings to halt humanity's rise. Through agents like Pocket Cat and the Lady of Moon, he engineers kidnappings and murders of godly children. He comes perilously close to preventing the birth of a new deity, only to be thwarted by a mix of mortal heroism and a new god's cunning. In the end, the moon god's pride is wounded, and his enigma only grows deeper. Players never confront RHER directly in the first game. He lingers instead as an ominous presence woven into the lore, a shadow overhead rather than a foe before you. This naturally leaves a lingering question. What comes next? How does an immortal trickster respond when mortals slip through his grasp? The answer, revealed in Fear and Hunger 2, TERMINA, is both epic and unexpected. Fast forward a few centuries to 1942. The world of fear and hunger has shifted into a grim, early 20th century setting, scarred and reshaped by a great war that mirrors our own World War II. Out of this scarred landscape emerges an event of nightmarish proportions, unfolding in the isolated town of Prehevil. 14 strangers, each under bizarre circumstances, are drawn to this town by the same shared dream, an invitation to something called the Festival of Termina. When they arrive, they find themselves trapped beneath a blood-red moon. A strange, unsettling figure declares the rules. The festival is nothing less than a death game. Only one contestant may survive. All the others must perish. It's a twisted, supernatural battle royale. And presiding over it all, like a malevolent overlord watching from above, is none other than the moon god, RHER, or at least, that's how it first appears. The Termina festival marks RHER's grand return to the stage, and what a flamboyant return it is. The moon itself looms unnaturally low over Prehevil, glowing a blood-red hue, and at times revealing a grotesque face of RHER staring down. The imagery instantly recalls MAJORA'S mask's infamous moon, with its disturbing, human-like face. In fact, one particular scene in Termina directly evokes that likeness, almost certainly as a deliberate homage by the game's creator. The result is an atmosphere where the very sky seems to leer at the contestants with hungry eyes. In the game's introduction, each of the 14 playable characters experiences a dream of being summoned into a strange hall. There, a dark-cloaked figure, Perkele, greets them on RHER's behalf, declaring the start of the festival. He frames it as an opportunity, a chance for one of you to have an illustrious reality, the festival to end all festivals. Though the words are dressed in celebration, the truth beneath is chillingly simple. Kill or be killed, all under the moon god's gaze. But why would RHER orchestrate such a cruel spectacle? On the surface, it fits perfectly with his contempt for both humanity and the new gods. The survivors of the Great War, each scarred, broken, or extraordinary in their own way, could be seen by RHER as either potential seeds of divinity or simply toys for his amusement. By forcing them into a brutal elimination game, he simultaneously weeds out the weak and tests the strongest, though to what ultimate end remains unclear. Perhaps RHER intended the sole survivor to become his pawn, or even a vessel for his will. Or perhaps the entire festival was nothing more than a cruel demonstration that under his blood-red moon, humanity would inevitably devour itself. It is a trickster's cruelty. Promise glory, exploit ambition, and then revel in the chaos. And RHER does not allow escape. Those who refuse to play face a punishment far more terrifying than death, the curse of moonlight cancer, a grotesque affliction that mutates its victims into the mindless, deformed horrors known as the moon-scorched. In RHER's festival, even pacifism becomes a death sentence of another kind. To run this twisted spectacle, RHER once again relies on his servants. Pocket Cat returns in Termina as a grotesque shopkeeper, offering useful items in exchange for the severed heads of fallen contestants. Yes, you read that correctly. He literally demands the heads of your rivals as currency. This macabre economy aligns perfectly with RHER's design. Pocket Cat effectively incentivizes the slaughter, ensuring the bloodbath continues to escalate. The role of Master of Ceremonies, however, falls to a new figure, Perkele. Gaunt and demonic in appearance, nicknamed the Green Knight, or the Faceless One by fans, Perkele acts as RHER's herald throughout the festival. He is the one who appears in the contestants' dreams to deliver RHER's decree, and he occasionally manifests in Prehivel to taunt, cajole, or steer the participants as the festival unfolds. In essence, Pocket Cat keeps the killing fueled, while Perkele presides over the ritual. Together, they operate like priest and executioner, ensuring that the moon god's cruel will dominates every corner of Termina. Speak of Perkele, his design takes direct inspiration from the urban legend called This Man. According to the original story, starting around 2006, thousands of people all over the world reported that they saw the same unfamiliar face in their dreams. But in reality, no man with such a face has ever been confirmed. It was a strange and mysterious phenomenon spread through flyers and posters with the question, "Have you ever dreamed of this man?" In Fear and Hunger 2, Termina, the player can find a flyer called Man in Dreams lying around on bookshelves across Prehivel. This flyer shows a soulless face, disturbingly familiar, the face of Perkele, with the description, "Have you seen this man in dreams?" Over the past week or so, since the full moon, people all over Prehivel and its neighboring settlements see this face in their dreams every night. If you are one of them, or if you have any information that can help us identify this person, please contact us. The flyer tells to contact us, but there is no contact information to be found from the flyer. This detail directly connects to the This Man story. At the same time, it implies that the dream the player experienced in the early game is also the dream that the citizens of Prehivel really experienced. It shows that the influence of Perkele and RHER does not stop with the contestants in the festival, but also reaches the whole population of Prehivel. Not only that, looking at what has already happened in Prehivel, I believe that RHER and his servants have been behind more than one blood-soaked festival called Termina. The goal is only one: to remove the potential seeds that could rival the old gods. Under the baleful moon, Prehivel transforms into a literal theater of madness. The festival unfolds across a fixed span of days, a timed event reminiscent of MAJORA'S Mask's infamous 3-day cycle. As time passes, the contestants not only clash with one another, but also witness the town itself unravel under the moon's curse. Ordinary citizens, and even some participants who lose hope, succumb to a grotesque affliction known as moon scorching. Victims twist into hideous beasts and gibbering lunatics that wander the streets, their humanity erased. It feels less like simple corruption and more like an epidemic. RHER's madness spreading through moonlight, infecting all it touches. Many of these abominations are clearly distorted reflections of the people they once were. One tragic example is a father obsessed with his child, who transforms into a monster cradling a doll, a nightmarish parody of his former self. Through this mechanic, the game makes RHER's nature chillingly tangible. His influence doesn't just destroy, it dredges up the darkest impulses buried in human hearts, turning inner demons into monstrous reality. Through the early and mid-game of Termina, every sign points toward RHER as the grand puppet master. The blood-red moon, the recurring nightmares, the moon's scorching plague, everything seems to scream Moon God's doing. Players can even access a grotesque, otherworldly realm known as RHER's dimension, or the Hall of RHER, a surreal dreamscape of floating eyes and celestial horrors. Here, the player may glimpse RHER directly, a colossal entity encircled by two vast, rotating rings of eyes, with a warped face looming at the center. The design feels drawn straight from scripture, reminiscent of the biblical Ophanim or thrones, angelic beings described as great wheels within wheels, covered in countless eyes. In Termina, however, this imagery is inverted into nightmare. RHER is not a holy guardian, but a cosmic watcher, an all-seeing judge whose gaze inspires dread rather than awe. It's clear the developers drew heavily from esoteric and religious symbolism to lend RHER his awe-inspiring presence. If the first game kept him hidden in shadows, the second thrusts him into the spotlight with terrifying grandeur, declaring, in effect, "Now you face the true cosmic horror." And indeed, should the player follow certain paths, they will eventually confront this entity directly in one of the game's climactic battles. However, and it's a big however, Fear and Hunger 2, Termina, throws the player a devastating curveball. Just when you think you've nailed it down, the evil moon god is making us slaughter each other. The story pulls the rug out from under that assumption. In the final act, atop the ancient tower where the last confrontations unfold, the truth is revealed by none other than Perkele himself. RHER isn't actually there. In fact, Perkele states plainly that RHER left the world like the rest of the old gods a long time ago, and that the blood-red moon looming over Prehevel is nothing more than his traces. Wait, what? So all this time, had we been struggling under the gaze of a ghost? A memory? According to Perkele, yes. The real RHER, the conscious old god, has long since departed. What hangs above the town is more like an afterimage, a remnant of his essence. The moon is indeed RHER's body and lingering power, but his mind has already moved on, whether to death, ascension, or some realm beyond comprehension. If your jaw dropped at that revelation, you're not alone. It reframes the entire festival of Termina. Was it all just a ruse? And if RHER was never truly in charge, then who was? Perkele wastes no time in answering. He declares that he was the true mastermind all along, though not on his own behalf. Rather, he reveals that he serves another deity, the sulfur god. It was this entity who orchestrated the festival, using RHER's name and imagery as a mask. This is a bombshell, because up until now, the sulfur god was little more than a shadow in lore, hinted at in scraps of notes, associated with alchemy, industry, and the grim machinery of war. As one of the most powerful ascended new gods, the sulfur god embodies the destructive potential of humanity's progress: sulfur, brimstone, chemical weapons, industrial slaughter. Suddenly, the festival is revealed as something far darker, a clandestine operation by the sulfur cult, likely aimed at either forging a new deity or eliminating rivals. They co-opted RHER's imagery, the moon, the curse, the nightmares, because his lingering traces were convenient power to exploit, or simply a scapegoat to hide behind. In Perkele's own words, RHER was nothing more than a pawn. And therein lies the delicious irony. The trickster god, infamous for deceiving and manipulating others, becomes the mask worn by another power to deceive the world. The deceiver himself deceived, his legacy twisted into someone else's game. Of course, this revelation only raises more questions. Was Perkele telling the whole truth about Sulphur's involvement? Or was he spinning yet another illusion? Fear and hunger thrives on ambiguity, and the layers of unreliable narration fit perfectly with its themes of deception and shifting realities. What we do know is that after Perkele's confession, he immediately confronts the player in a climactic boss battle, boasting that he is now the true orchestrator of the festival. Yet even after his defeat, the story takes an even stranger turn. Despite Perkele's insistence that RHER is long gone, the moon god descends for one final confrontation. In Ending B of Termina, the protagonist must face RHER, or perhaps only his echo, an afterimage, or even a hallucination. The fight itself is surreal, unlike a typical battle. Lore notes suggest that the moon god becomes bored after a time, and with that, the festival simply ends. No grand death, no heroic victory, just a god losing interest. The surviving contestant is then permitted to leave Prehevel as the sole victor, watching as the blood-red moon recedes. The phrasing that RHER was merely bored is both absurdly casual and utterly terrifying. It underscores the inhuman mentality of such a being. To a god like RHER, humanity's desperate life and death struggles are nothing more than fleeting amusement. So what do we make of this? Ultimately, the game leaves RHER's true role shrouded in ambiguity, but two dominant interpretations stand out. If Perkele were truthful, RHER truly departed from the world ages ago, leaving only traces of his essence behind. The moon god you battle at the end is not the real deity, but rather a psychic construct or lingering power invoked by Perkele's ritual. In this reading, the true villain of Termina is the sulphur god, acting through Perkele, while RHER is reduced to little more than a curse haunting the land. The final fight becomes symbolic, a confrontation with an echo of RHER's psyche. Once you endure it long enough, the phantom simply dissipates, becoming bored because it possesses no independent will. On the other hand, if Perkele were lying, or only half right, perhaps RHER did withdraw from the world, but was still watching from afar. When Perkele falls, RHER's consciousness briefly reasserts itself to punish or test the final survivor. Or maybe RHER was never truly gone at all. Being a trickster, he might have feigned absence while covertly manipulating events. The fact that the game's interface explicitly names the final opponent RHER and not illusion or remnant lends weight to the idea that the player is, at least in part, confronting the genuine moon god. He begins as a mystery, and he ends as a mystery. Even when you think you've triumphed over him, you can never be sure whether you truly faced the moon god himself or merely his shadow. This deliberate ambiguity has fueled countless fan theories. Some players compare RHER's state to mythological or fictional parallels. One Redditor, for instance, likened him to Nyx in Persona 3, an otherworldly being whose body became the moon while her psyche lingered on Earth, sealed away. By that analogy, RHER's body is the moon we see, the trace in the sky, while his psyche might still drift through the world as moonlight or an unseen influence. In this reading, the Termina battle could be less a physical duel and more a psychic confrontation with his lingering will. Others have proposed even stranger ideas, that RHER may not exist in the traditional sense at all, but is instead a byproduct of human deceit. In this theory, lies themselves gave birth to him, just as the moon once tricked early humans into believing it was a second sun, and thus became the vessel for the trickster god. These theories may be far-fetched, but they underscore the brilliance of RHER's design. He straddles the line between reality and perception, myth and madness. RHER is less a character to be understood and more a cosmic riddle, one that ensures his presence lingers long after the game ends. Regardless of the exact truth, the TERMINA incident cements RHER's legacy in the lore. By the conclusion of Fear and Hunger 2, his lingering influence, his traces, appears finally expunged. The moon god is defeated or dispelled, and Berserk, his last herald, lies slain. It feels like the closing of a chapter. The old gods, RHER among them, have truly passed from the world, leaving only mortals and the new gods to shape what comes next. Yet the scars endure. Prehevel's nightmare lingers in memory, and the dreadful thought persists that perhaps the moon overhead still bears a hidden grin. As players and lore enthusiasts, we're left with a conclusion that is both satisfying and unsettling. Humanity may have survived the trickster moon god's trial, but did we truly outwit him, or merely stumble through yet another layer of his design? That lingering doubt, that thin line between survival and manipulation, is the perfect final trick. Now that we've traced RHER's story within the games, let's step back and consider the bigger picture, the symbolism and inspirations behind this trickster moon god. Fear and Hunger's creator, Miro Havarinen, layered the series with dense references to mythology, occult traditions, and even modern pop culture. RHER is no exception. In fact, he may be one of the richest characters in terms of multi-layered influences. Peeling back these layers not only sheds light on RHER's character, but also deepens our appreciation for how Fear and Hunger seamlessly blends real-world lore with its own mythos. So, what are the threads that form this lunar trickster? We can explore them across 4 main aspects: mythological parallels, religious and occult symbolism, psychological themes, and pop culture homages. Throughout human history, the moon has been a source of mystery, fear, and fascination. Across cultures, it was often personified as a deity, sometimes nurturing, sometimes capricious, always watching. RHER draws on fragments of these lunar traditions, but twists them into something darker and more malignant. One of the clearest archetypes he embodies is the trickster. Trickster gods appear in countless world myths: Loki in Norse legend, Eshu in West African lore, Coyote among Native American tales. They disrupt the status quo, bending rules to their own ends, sometimes enlightening humanity with stolen knowledge, other times sowing discord for amusement. RHER is explicitly titled the trickster god in-game, and his actions fit the role perfectly, scheming against rival deities, luring mortals with false promises, and orchestrating cruel games that pit humans against one another. In many ways, he recalls Loki, infamous for jealousy and malicious pranks, or Eris, goddess of strife, whose spite sparked catastrophic wars. What sets RHER apart, however, is his lunar identity. Traditional tricksters are rarely tethered to the moon. Their domains are chaos, fire, or crossroads. By binding the archetype of deception to the cold, ever-watchful moon, Fear and Hunger forges a unique mythic hybrid, a trickster whose lies are illuminated not by firelight, but by moonlight, a pale glow that deceives, distorts, and drives mortals mad. When it comes to moon deities, RHER doesn't neatly correspond to any single mythological figure, but he does invert several. Across cultures, lunar gods and goddesses are often associated with wisdom, like Thoth in Egyptian myth, linked to the moon and knowledge, or with natural rhythms and cycles, such as Chandra in Hindu tradition, or Tsukuyomi in Japanese lore. The moon has long symbolized the subconscious, the hidden, and the changeable. RHER certainly embodies the aspect of hidden truth. His moonlight exposes secrets otherwise left in darkness. But unlike benevolent lunar deities who gently guide or illuminate the night, RHER's light is a merciless spotlight, casting humanity's ugliest impulses into stark relief. Within the pantheon of fear and hunger, this distortion becomes clear through contrast. If Sylvian echoes a Mother Earth or fertility goddess, and Grogoroth mirrors an archetypal war god, then RHER emerges as a perverse echo of lunar deities, not the guardian of tides and dreams, but the god of lunacy itself. RHER solely embodies lunacy in the fear and hunger setting, making him less a gentle Luna and more its malignant reflection. His moonlight is not tranquil or comforting, but corrosive, a beacon of madness rather than serenity. In other words, Luna turned malevolent. One of the most striking religious parallels is RHER's depiction as a colossal figure wreathed in rings of eyes. This imagery strongly evokes the Ophanim, or thrones, of biblical angelology, described in the book of Ezekiel as wheels within wheels, covered in eyes that bear up God's throne. In Scripture, those eyes symbolize divine omniscience and perfect motion, a comforting image of God's watchful presence. RHER borrows the form, but warps the meaning. His countless eyes mark him as the ever-watching God, but instead of benevolent omniscience, they embody cosmic surveillance, paranoia, and violation. Where the Ophanim inspire awe, RHER's gaze feels oppressive, an all-seeing moon that strips mortals of privacy, exposing their secrets under harsh lunar light. This design also gestures toward Lovecraftian horror. Lovecraft's pantheon brims with entities, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, depicted as swirling, inhuman masses dotted with endless eyes, embodiments of knowledge too vast and alien for the human mind. RHER fits neatly into this archetype, an ancient being whose very revelations can unravel sanity. It's no coincidence, then, that even the villain's wiki categorizes RHER under Lovecraftian horrors and reality warpers. His eyes don't just see, they distort, making perception itself unreliable. The result is a creature that blurs the sacred and the horrific, a parody of heaven's watchman turned into the ultimate voyeur of madness. Another mythic parallel lies in the resemblance between RHER and Cronus Saturn from Greek and Roman myth. Cronus, the elder Titan, heard a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him. In a desperate attempt to avert fate, he swallowed each newborn until Zeus escaped and fulfilled the prophecy anyway. RHER's campaign against the children of the new gods, most notably Nilvan's daughter, echoes this archetype almost perfectly. Like Cronus, he is an aging ruler terrified of being usurped by a younger generation. His answer is the same: infanticide, eliminating potential rivals before they can ascend. The myth of Cronus carries themes of cyclical time and inevitability, no tyrant can halt the coming of a new age. And indeed, in fear and hunger, RHER's desperate schemes ultimately fail to stop the rise of the cruel age, the industrial era brought about by the birth of a new god. His actions only delay the tide of change, never prevent it. This parallel casts RHER in a tragic light. Beneath his swagger, as the trickster god, lies something almost pathetic, a being who clings to the old order, terrified of change, terrified of irrelevance. In the end, his story is less one of triumph than of inevitability, the downfall of the old to make way for the new. The mention of sulfur in Termina's twist invites a deeper look through the lens of alchemy. In Western alchemical tradition, creation was often described in terms of three prime elements: salt, sulfur, and mercury. Sulfur represented the soul or essence, fiery, active, and combustible. Mercury stood for the spirit, volatile, mutable, a bridge between realms. Salt symbolized the body, fixed, stable, material. Placed against this framework, RHER feels distinctly mercurial. As the moon-aligned trickster, he shares traits with Mercury the god: quick, elusive, manipulative, forever shifting roles. In astrology, Mercury governs intellect, communication, and deception, qualities RHER embodies as the patron of lies and illusions. Even chemically, Mercury is associated with madness. Mad as a hatter, stemming from mercury poisoning, which neatly aligns with RHER's title as the god of lunacy. By contrast, the sulfur god reflects a very different. Sulfur is combustion, passion, rigidity, even aggression, the fiery essence that drives transformation through destruction. Where RHER is shifting, playful, and maddening, sulfur is forceful, industrial, and consuming. Seen this way, the Termina twist takes on another layer of meaning, the mercurial moon god being eclipsed by the sulfuric new god. It's not just a change in divine actors, but a symbolic alchemical shift, from the volatility of deception to the rigidity of fire and industry. In fear and hunger, the sulfur god clearly embodies technology, modern weaponry, and the brutal march of progress. Sulfur evokes gunpowder, chemical warfare, and even the brimstone of hell, symbols of both industry and destruction. In this light, the clash between RHER and the sulfur god in Termina, even if one-sided manipulation can be read as an occult allegory, Mercury versus sulfur. On one side stands RHER, the mercurial trickster, god of lunacy, master of illusions and shifting truths. On the other is the sulfur god, the fiery, rigid force of industrial advancement, fueled by combustion and war. Their symbolic opposition reflects a world caught between two paradigms, the mystical volatility of the old order and the sulfurous fire of modern upheaval. The symbolism runs deeper still. The planetary symbol for Mercury is drawn as a crescent moon atop a cross, an echo of RHER's lunar identity. In this sense, RHER fits naturally into the Mercury role of alchemy, elusive, deceptive, tied to the mind and to madness. Meanwhile, the sulfur god represents transformation through destruction, the burning away of the old to forge something new. Read this way, Termina dramatizes not just a battle of gods, but a larger alchemical and historical shift, humanity leaving behind the mercurial mysteries of the old gods and being consumed by the sulfurous blaze of industry, war, and modernity. Even beyond the alchemical lens, fear and hunger is saturated with occult imagery, and RHER sits right at the heart of it. He is introduced to players through the Skin Bible, an in-game grimoire attributed to Enki. The is no coincidence. Enki was a Sumerian god of wisdom and trickery, a perfect parallel to RHER's own dual nature. The skin Bibles themselves read like fragments from a forbidden tome. RHER's chapter, in particular, mixes lunar myth with mad ramblings and hidden truths, a style that deliberately echoes real-world occult literature, where moon worship and lunacy cults often blur sanity and revelation. Gameplay mechanics reinforce this atmosphere. Players can inscribe magic circles, sigils of the gods, and perform rituals to invoke their marks. Ritual practices lifted straight from occult traditions of summoning and pact-making. RHER's own mark grants forbidden knowledge at the cost of personal comfort and stability. It's essentially a Faustian bargain, mirroring countless occult stories. The opening of a third eye that awakens insight, but strips away innocence and peace of mind. RHER can also be read through the lens of the deceitful spirit or demonic archetypes in religious lore. His moonlight, which exposes terrible truths, recalls the Christian notion of temptation, knowledge offered at devastating cost. In this sense, RHER's dynamic with humanity, tempt with truth, curse with madness, mirrors the story of Eden, like the serpent offering the fruit of knowledge. His illumination opens mortal eyes only to cast them into ruin. In this way, RHER bears resemblance to a Luciferian figure, though not as a heroic rebel, but as a corrupter. Lucifer in Latin literally means light bearer, and RHER is nothing if not a bearer of light. His moonlight pierces the darkness, illuminating what should perhaps remain hidden. But where divine light uplifts, his lunar glow brings only despair. This interpretation is speculative, but it fits seamlessly into Fear and Hunger's broader theme of inverted religious motifs. Just as Almer appears Christ-like, yet reveals a vengeful, unsettling side in the lore, RHER plays the part of a false illuminator, his revelations damning rather than redeeming. On a psychological level, RHER embodies the notion that too much truth can shatter the mind. This is a core theme of cosmic horror, the insanity of knowing. It resonates with Lovecraft's tales, where characters spiral into madness after glimpsing the vast, incomprehensible reality of the cosmos. There's also a Jungian undercurrent. Carl Jung described the shadow self, the repressed, hidden parts of the psyche that can overwhelm us if faced too directly. In this light, RHER functions almost like a manifestation of humanity's collective shadow, the unconscious fears and lies that, once exposed, corrode sanity. Dreams, fittingly, are his chosen stage. In TERMINA, contestants are summoned and manipulated within shared dreamscapes, territory that mirrors the unconscious mind. RHER's intrusion into dreams symbolizes psychological violation. A god who doesn't just punish the body, but invades the psyche, twisting perception itself. Through this lens, RHER isn't just a trickster or a monster. He is the terror of self-knowledge, the fear that peering too deeply into truth or into our own minds will destroy us. RHER's influence can also be framed through the lens of mass hysteria. In Pre-Hevel, an entire town collapses into madness and monstrosity beneath the full moon, an uncanny dramatization of folklore that links lunar cycles with erratic human behavior. Historically, there are countless myths and even recorded panics around the full moon. Tales of lunacy outbreaks, werewolf transformations, and communities convinced the moon was driving people wild. modern psychiatry debates whether lunar phases truly affect mental health. Most scientific studies find little evidence, but the belief remains stubbornly persistent. Even today, some police officers and hospital staff still remark that full moon nights feel crazier than usual. Fear and hunger leans into that superstition with grim certainty. Under RHER's gaze, the connection between the moon and madness becomes absolute. His full moon doesn't just influence behavior, it catalyzes outright hysteria and transformation. In this sense, RHER personifies a timeless human fear, the idea that the moon governs not only the tides of the sea, but also the tides of the mind. The festival of Termina also carries a deeply psychological dimension. At its core, it functions as a cruel social experiment, a death game that forces its participants to confront their morality, desperation, and fear. It plays out like a fusion of Saw and Battle Royale, a constructed scenario designed to strip away the facade of civility and expose what lies beneath. Whether orchestrated by RHER or the sulfur god wearing his mask, the festival is essentially a study in human nature under extreme duress. Its timing is no coincidence. The world has just emerged from a devastating war, and many contestants already bear scars of trauma, guilt, or rage. The festival drags these personal demons to the surface, reducing the survivors to raw instinct. Some become monsters. Others cling to fragile heroism, but all are transformed. This is where RHER's symbolic role sharpens. He thrives on anguish, mental, emotional, and spiritual. The festival becomes a warped mirror of wartime itself. How fear can corner people into irrational cruelty, and hunger, whether literal hunger or ambition, can drive them to commit atrocities. It is, quite literally, a fear and hunger gauntlet. Psychologically, the message is bleak, but clear. The monster is already inside us. RHER's moonlight doesn't create evil. It merely illuminates it, coaxing it out into the open. From a literary perspective, RHER also shares DNA with figures like Pennywise from It, an ancient entity that manipulates perception, thrives on fear, and cloaks itself in illusions. Likewise, he echoes the Yellow King from Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow, a figure tied to a play whose revelations drive readers to madness. Fear and Hunger even includes its own character called the Yellow King, a likely nod to this tradition. The recurring theme here is truth as madness. In much of weird fiction, it manifests through forbidden books, grimoires like the Necronomicon, whose knowledge overwhelms human minds. In Fear and Hunger, RHER himself becomes that forbidden text. He is a living Necronomicon. Stare at the moon too long, and sanity unravels. Even the game's mechanics reflect this inversion. There is an item called the Book of Enlightenment, which lets players save progress. Yet, enlightenment in the context of RHER is double-edged. Illumination is indistinguishable from madness. His moonlight offers revelation, but revelation that corrodes. One particularly poetic fan theory suggests that RHER exists because of human lies. As one Redditor speculated, the old gods created humanity, and before us, there was no such thing as deceit. Our existence brought forth the concept of lying, thus creating the trickster god. In this interpretation, RHER becomes the very personification of deceit, born with the first falsehood ever spoken. The moon as his vessel is symbolically perfect. Early humans may have mistaken it for a second sun. Tricked by its pale glow, a cosmic illusion embedded in the sky itself. It's not official canon, but it's an elegant metaphor. Humanity's own tendency towards self-deception gave rise to the trickster moon god. If true, then RHER's power comes not from alien divinity, but from human folly. And that makes his role all the more tragic. He is both tormentor and reflection, a monster we unknowingly created to haunt ourselves. RHER, like all old gods from the green hue, is born not as flesh, but as pure concept, nourished under the divine light of that primordial realm. If Sylvian and Grogoroth embody the perfect balance between fertility and destruction, then what exactly is the balance of RHER? Let's return to his symbol. 3 interlocking circles form a strange equilibrium. In alchemical tradition, these 3 circles echo Paracelsus Tria Prima. Sulfur stands for spirit and chaos, fiery and volatile. Salt represents the body and matter, stable and grounding. Mercury, meanwhile, is the principle of transformation, the mind in constant flux. Notice how RHER's symbol twists toward the upper right circle, marked by the serpent's head. Mercury, transformation, mind. It aligns perfectly with RHER's influence in the game. His moonlight doesn't just burn the flesh, it corrupts the mind, tipping mortals across a threshold into monstrous forms. In gameplay, each character has a mind bar, representing their sanity and mental balance. If mind drops to 0 for an extended period of time, the character will begin to lose their humanity. Depending on the circumstances, your playstyle, and the events that occur, the character may undergo a complete bestial transformation, turning into a grotesque creature that can no longer be controlled. This event is described as follows. Something is moving inside you. Something primal is trying to get out of your hollow shell. Your body. It's bursting at its seams. Percali himself explains that RHER's light reflects the truth, that humanity is ugly, no different from monsters. But is that really the truth? If we borrow from Carl Jung, the answer becomes chillingly clear. In Jungian psychology, the psyche is often divided into the self, our primal shadow aspects, and the ego, the conscious identity shaped by society. The ego tends to dominate, repressing the raw instincts of the self. Perhaps mind bar threshold represents the fragile border between the two, the liminal line between wakefulness and dream, sanity and collapse. As I've argued before, humanity in fear and hunger is fundamentally flawed. We are creatures of repression, forever chained by rules, guilt, and social masks. Ego hides our fear, our primal desires, our inner darkness. The only thing keeping us from becoming literal monsters is the strength of our mind. But what happens when that mind fails? Under the burning light of RHER, the chain breaks. What was buried erupts. Fear, hunger, lust, violence, all the truths we hide beneath ego's mask. That is the essence of moon scorching. Here lies the paradox. RHER's proclamation is both lie and truth. Yes, humans hide monstrous instincts beneath the surface. But no, that is not the whole of humanity. Ego, culture, and higher ideals are also real. RHER, however, twists perception so that only the shadow is revealed. He shows the shadow, but never the whole. His power lies in ambiguity, in the delicate equilibrium between truth and lie, dream and waking, reality and illusion. This is why one of his titles is the trickster god. But perhaps an even more fitting name emerges when we peel back the layers. RHER, the god of half-truth. Finally, let's consider some of the direct inspirations the developer likely drew upon for RHER. The most obvious is the legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. The parallels are too specific to ignore. In Majora's Mask, the doomed land of Termina faces destruction under a grotesque moon with a leering face, falling closer with each passing day during the Carnival of Time. In Fear and Hunger 2, Termina, we find ourselves in a festival called Termina, beneath a baleful moon with a monstrous face, again threatening to annihilate the world. The reference is clear, but the tone is starkly different. Majora's Mask ultimately tells a story of hope. The hero actively works to prevent catastrophe, restoring light to a cursed land. Fear and Hunger inverts that. Its Termina festival is not about saving the world, but merely surviving the curse, or failing that, succumbing to it. The moon doesn't need to crash to destroy lives. Its madness alone is enough. For players who grew up with Majora's Mask, seeing RHER's moon leer down is a chilling jolt of recognition. It taps into nostalgia, but twists it into something grotesque. What was once an unsettling children's adventure becomes, in Fear and Hunger, a full-fledged nightmare. Another likely inspiration is Kentaro Miura's manga BERSERK, which the developer of Fear and Hunger has openly cited as a major influence on the series' tone and themes. In BERSERK, humanity is manipulated by higher entities, such as the God Hand and the idea of evil. And one of the pivotal rituals, the eclipse, summons a crimson sky drenched in blood, demanding human sacrifice. The imagery resonates strongly with Fear and Hunger. A red moon or eclipse hanging over mortals who are nothing more than pawns in the games of gods. RHER's Termina festival could be read as a kind of extended eclipse, a prolonged, ritualized slaughter under the gaze of a blood-red moon. We also know from interviews and community sleuthing that Miro Havrinen has been open about certain inspirations. For example, the Crow Mauler was influenced by Silent Hill's Pyramid Head, while Needles was inspired by Art the Clown. If we extend that logic, it's very likely that RHER's design draws from multiple sources as well. His spinning rings of eyes may trace back to cosmic horror art traditions, but they also recall creatures from other games steeped in Lovecraftian imagery. In Bloodborne, for instance, the moon presence and bosses like Rom, the vacuous spider, evoke the same mood. A blood moon overhead, hidden truths bleeding into reality, and monstrosities lurking in the moonlight. While not visually identical, the shared atmosphere of lunar dread and forbidden knowledge is unmistakable. Meanwhile, fans have also drawn comparisons to Persona 3's Nyx, a cosmic mother figure sealed in the moon whose presence threatens humanity. Whether or not Havrinen consciously drew from this, it demonstrates how RHER resonates with broader archetypes of moon monsters across modern media entities that embody both the allure and the terror of the night sky. In short, RHER feels less like a single borrowed idea and more like a collage of inspirations, Lovecraftian horrors, mythic archetypes, video game precedents, all distilled into one trickster moon god whose imagery feels both eerily familiar and uniquely haunting. It's also worth noting how Fear and Hunger's pantheon borrows from multiple mythological roots. Names like Almer, Grogoroth, Sylvian, and Venushka each echo different traditions. Almir recalls the All-Father or Semitic El. Groggoroth hints at Gorgoroth, both the Tolkien reference and the parody title in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. Sylvian evokes Sylvan, forest spirits, or even Sylvanus. Venushka carries a faintly Sanskrit tone. By contrast, RHER's name stands apart. It doesn't map neatly onto any single mythological figure. Some have joked it looks like a distorted attempt at Ra, the Egyptian sun god, flipped into RHER, a lunar foil. If Ra embodies the sun's order and radiance, then RHER, as the moon embodies chaos and dark truth, a deliberate inversion. RHER's unblinking stare directly references the moon from Majora's Mask, while his design draws from the biblical Ophanim, those otherworldly wheels covered in eyes. These nods reveal how the developer deliberately fuses classic gaming imagery with ancient mythic symbolism. The result is a character who feels uncannily familiar, tapping into memories of Zelda's leering moon or the awe-inspiring descriptions of angelic wheels, yet also uniquely terrifying in fear and hunger's bleak, grotesque context. By blending nostalgia with esotericism, RHER becomes more than just a moon god. He is a hybrid of pop culture dread and sacred horror, a figure at once recognizable and alien. He is a hybrid of pop culture dread and sacred horror, a figure at once recognizable and alien. RHER, the trickster moon, god of fear and hunger, is a masterclass in multifaceted storytelling. Within the game's narrative, he is both ever-present and elusive, literally looming over the world while quietly pulling strings to keep humanity in its place. He embodies mystery, an old god whose true motives and nature remain maddeningly out of reach. He embodies madness, warping perception, and forcing characters and players alike to question what is real beneath his cold lunar glow. And he embodies conflict, the cosmic struggle between old and new gods and mortals, truth and sanity. Throughout our exploration, we saw how RHER's in-game lore paints him as both antagonist and test. In the first game, he's the unseen puppet master, sending nightmares and nightmare creatures to snuff out a budding hope for mankind. In the second, he's the face of an atrocity that turns friends into foes and men into monsters, only for us to learn that face might have been a mask itself. The layers of deception surrounding RHER, from him tricking humans to possibly being tricked by another god, create a sense of a grand cosmic irony. Even in apparent defeat, RHER leaves us wondering if we really won, or if we simply danced to a tune he composed long ago. On a thematic level, RHER represents the terrifying idea that knowledge has a price. He raises the question, would you rather live comfortably in ignorance, human filth, or see the awful truth of the world? Most people in fear and hunger don't get a choice. RHER's light forces truth on them, and they break under it. But as players, we vicariously experience that dilemma. Every time you read a lore book or delve deeper into the dungeons, you uncover more of the gruesome reality of that world, and perhaps sacrifice a bit of your own comfort. RHER is like the patron saint of the game's entire horror atmosphere, always whispering, "Do you really want to know?" and then cackling when we flinch. In a broader context, RHER connects to real-world concepts in surprising ways. He draws from ancient archetypes of the trickster and the lunatic, reminding us of how long humans have feared the moon's influence or been fascinated by trickster gods' double-edged gifts. The developers cleverly wove those concepts into a character that feels original yet archetypal, the jealous moon who won't step aside for the sun. Or, in this case, mankind's rising star. The inspirations from myth, Cronus devouring children, religion, all-seeing eyes, and fallen light-bringers, alchemy, sulfur versus mercury, madness versus reason, and even other media, Zelda's moon, Lovecraft's cosmic dread, all give RHER a rich cultural resonance. This is probably why even after finishing the games, fans discuss and theorize about RHER endlessly. He taps into something primal, the fear that the universe itself might be laughing at us, deceiving us, or worse, plotting against us. Emotionally, if you ask me, RHER's tale is both terrifying and oddly tragic. There's terror in the idea of an entity that considers us insects under a magnifying glass and who can twist our minds at a whim. But there's tragedy in RHER being essentially the last of his kind, desperately trying to hold on to relevance. He couldn't stop time. Humanity progressed, and gods came and went. In the end, RHER is like a bitter old monarch who ends up a ghost of himself, staging cruel games that ultimately crumble. When that moon god gets bored and withdraws at the finale, I can't help but detect a sense of loneliness, as if even victory over mortals couldn't fill the void of his fading glory. The ever-watching god, after millennia of watching, finds nothing worth watching anymore. In that sense, fear and hunger manage to make even a cosmic horror figure subtly poignant, without ever redeeming his evil actions. For us as the audience, be it players or lore enthusiasts, the journey of unraveling RHER's mysteries is thrilling and rewarding. We gathered scraps of lore from item descriptions like the skin Bibles. We listened to NPCs' hushed whispers about the moon, and we survived hallucinations and boss battles that felt like fever dreams. And by piecing those together, we became, in a way, initiated into RHER's truth. Perhaps we even empathize a tiny bit with those poor souls who lost their minds, because we too saw how deep the rabbit hole or green hue goes. But unlike many of RHER's victims, we get to step back into the light of our world, having stared into the moon and hopefully kept our sanity. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you gaze at a full moon on a clear night, you'll recall RHER's story. You might feel a slight chill, imagining an ancient eye open within that lunar sphere, sizing you up with silent disdain. You might wonder what hidden truths lie behind the familiar glow. But you can also take comfort in this thought. We learned RHER's secrets here today and lived to tell the tale. In the end, the trickster moon god couldn't keep his secrecy from us, and that, in its own small way, is a triumph of human curiosity over cosmic fear. Thank you for exploring this deep, dark lore with me. It's been quite a journey through madness, myth, and moonlight. If you enjoyed unraveling RHER's secrets, there are many more mysteries in the world of fear and hunger to discover, each with their own blend of horror and wonder. Until next time, keep your wits about you and beware of strange dreams under the full moon. After all, as RHER's legacy reminds us, some truths are only revealed in the darkest nights. Good night, and sleep tight.